See, God's not limited, and your boss isn't too tough for God to change his mind. I saw this in a meeting. It's so dramatic, I'll never forget it. Way back in the early 90s, when the former Soviet Union opened, there were 87 different groups who came together to send people over to the former Soviet Union to take Bible teaching and Christian morals and ethics at the request of the government. And I was at a pastor's conference in the early years. And there was a group in one particular country in the former Soviet Union who was very, very anti-God. And they got a hold of the government, and they convinced the government to close the group I was leading out. And we got an announcement of this in a meeting with 300 pastors in Phoenix, Arizona. Right in the meeting. And one of the men who was a leader with me walked right up and said, "It's over. They just closed us. We just got word." We had a break. We didn't tell everybody in the room, and we met in a side room, and one man was crying openly. We had put so much of our life into this, and it was being closed. And he was sitting on my bed, and I was in a chair, and he was just had his hands like this, and he was weeping. And I said, "Oh, God's not going to let that happen. God's not going to bring us all this way and let somebody else close the door. We need to go back and ask God to change their mind." So we went back into these 300 pastors. I said, "We need to get on our knees. We need to beg God until we feel release. Let him change that whole country's opinion about this." We got on our knees. 2 hours later, we got word all the way across. The government's changed their permission. You're granted to come. Don't ever fight that group, that authority. Just go right around them. "Lord, this is not hard for you." So God can, in your notes, make your authority change his mind and grant your request. C. The third one is the hand of God intervenes with his presence. With his presence. God can make his presence known in a specific place. In a specific place. There's a very interesting time that this took place that just is one of my favorites in the Bible, when there was Elisha and a whole army came against him, and he was in this kind of little valley, and the whole army with their chariots were all the way around this valley, and Elisha's servant gets up and says, "Oh, we're dead, we're not going to make it." And Elisha says, "Oh, it'll be fine." "What do you mean?" And Elisha said, "Lord, look at it in your notebook. 2 Kings 6. So he answered and said, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And I'm sure the servant looked around and said, "Where are they? Where are the ones with us? Because we're just here." And Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. He saw what? The presence of the Lord. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The presence of God was there. That's why over and over again, when men and women in the Bible were afraid of going beyond their comfort zone, you know what God always said? "Don't be afraid. I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you." Those chariots didn't show up when Elisha prayed. They were already there. I don't think Elisha saw them either. I think Elisha knew. And I think Elisha said, "Just open his eyes, and by the way, Lord, let me see them too." And you remember when the tabernacle was built, and when the temple was built, that God's Spirit came down, and the cloud was there, and the presence of the Lord was there? Maybe you've come into a meeting, a church service, and when you walked in the back door, you said to yourself or your partner, "Oh, God is in this place. God's in this place." One of the greatest revivals to ever hit the world happened in the New England part of our country in the last century. And the presence of God was so strong, this is recorded, actual recorded history, that when people were coming to a certain town where God was moving, they would actually get out of their horse and carriages, get on their knees, and repent of their sin. Just coming into the city. And it got so strong that there's an actual recorded event in which a ship was coming from England, and about 1.5 miles from shore, the presence of the Lord came so strong on the ship, the entire ship got on its knees and begged God to forgive them for their sins. the presence of God. When the presence of God shows up, everything changes. I remember being asked to go speak to a group of men's leaders in our country who had men's ministries. There was about 80 of them. And I was asked to speak one night. And I flew up to this location, and we had dinner with about 6 of the men, and the leader, who I'd never met before, was next to me, and I said to him, how long would you like me to speak tonight? He said, about 35 minutes. I said, okay, what would you like me to do, I said to him, if God shows up tonight? And he looked at me and said, what do you mean, if God shows up? I said, well, if God shows up, what do you want me to do? I want you to speak for 35 minutes. He said, okay. I said, I'll tell you what, if God shows up tonight, I'm going to look at you, and if you want me to end, just go like this, and I'll end. And he said, what are you talking about? It was obviously, he'd never seen the hand of God before. So I went and was praying. I prayed a lot before I got there for that meeting. And went into the meeting, and there was a room with 80 men, all leaders of Christian groups, Christian denominations, of men ministries. And I began to speak, and I was praying, Lord, show up. Why do you have me here? What do you want to do? And as I was praying and speaking, there's a man 4th row back on the end. I didn't know who he was. I stopped speaking and sensed so clearly there was something troubling him. And I came down from the front. Actually, there was no ledge. It was on the floor. And I walked back to him, and I stood right next to him. He was right here. And I said, sir, we've never met before, but I sense something is really bothering you. Right in front of everyone. Is that true? No. No, everything's fine. You sure? Yes. Well, forgive me. And I went back up and continued to speak and kept praying. And by this time it was so clear, go talk to that man. So I took a chair and I walked down the center aisle, and let's say you're the man. I sat the chair here, and I sat down. I said, sir, I want to apologize. I cannot go on. Something is deeply troubling you. What is it? I'm quitting the ministry tonight. You're kidding. No, I came to this conference. I'm going to quit the ministry tonight. I said, why are you quitting the ministry tonight? He says, I used to be in business and made a lot of money. And then I went into ministry, and you don't make much money in ministry. He said, I used all my savings and all my retirement. Then I second mortgaged my house and used all it. And now I'm $16,000 in debt. And I'm quitting. I said, there's not one of us in this room who can't identify with how you feel. But I just want to ask you one question. Did God call you into the ministry? Yes. Are you sure? Absolutely. So here's the question. Has God asked you to leave? Got real quiet. No. So the only question I want to ask you then is, are you sure you want to go? If he hasn't asked you to leave. But what about the money? So that's the wrong question. What about God is the right question. He said, God hasn't asked me to leave. I know. What are you going to do? Start to weep. Some of the guys came around and put their hands on him. They said, I'm not going to leave. He said, I respect you for that. Will you shake on that? Yes, we shook. I said, there's only one other person who needs to hear this. That's the person you were going to quit on. I said, will you stand and pray and tell God that in front of all of us? And a bunch of the men came all around him. Many guys had tears in their eyes. They knew who he was. And this man apologized and broke down and recommitted on the spot. He sat down. And somebody else said, it's me. And when he did, my man over here, who was the head of the meeting, stood up. Wait a minute. He needs $16,000. I'll give $1,000. I turned and said, Darnie and I will give $1,000. And in the space of about 50 seconds. The men gave him $16,000. And I came back to the man and I said, you know, sir, the dollar wasn't given until after you made your commitment. Then this man stood up again. It's me. I was quitting tonight too. That happened to his life, and then another man here. And this presence of God was all in the room. And as I came back from that part, there was one man I knew a little bit sitting on this chair. And he had his head down and his arms between his knees like this. And he was shaking his head. And I came over and put my hands on his shoulder and I said, what's the matter? He said, oh, nothing. I said, oh, yes there is. When God moves, it's just amazing. I said, what's the matter? He said, he started to weeping. He said, all my life I wanted to have a conference center for men around the lake and have cabins around the lake and have men in, leaders in, that I could mentor and disciple. I thought, oh, that's tremendous. He said, well, last week, my wife and I got in our car, and it was so heavy on me, we just started driving. He said, I drove in part of which I'd never been before, and we turned around a corner, we came into a ranch I had never known was there. And this ranch had a lake, and had cabins, and had a for sale sign. How much was it? He said, it was so much money. I thanked the man, and my heart sank. I said, you know, would you serve God with this piece of property? Oh, yes, but there's no way we can buy it. I said, well, that's fine. I said, put your hands like this. He said, what for? Just put your hands like this. I said, man, we need his down payment. So I took out all the money I had in my pocket and threw it on his arms. You guys are too anxious right here. Look at this. And do you know, all 80 men, emptied every single thing we had in our pockets until the money was like this. This man is weeping. He says, how am I going to buy this? I said, well, God can give you this, he can give you the rest. And then I came to another meeting and I saw him. He came running up. He said, you'll never guess what? We bought it and paid cash. How'd you get the money? I don't know. But that part right there, God will do it. God will do it. 4, the hand of God intervenes to defend and to protect. To defend and to protect. God can protect you from any human or spiritual attack. There's a great comment between Pilate and between Jesus in John chapter 19. Pilate said to him, are you not speaking to me? Don't you know that I have the power, said Pilate, to crucify you and the power to release you? I love Jesus' answer. Jesus answered, you have no power. You have no power against me unless, watch this, it's been given to you from above. Power to protect. So, just imagine, you go to this very difficult circumstance, and you're afraid of your life. You know what you need to do? Just turn around. Jesus said, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you, and I'm right here. And trust me, I can take care of him. Sometimes he protects you in ways you never imagine. We were in the Philippines, my daughter Jennifer and I. And I was there for Campus Crusade. They were having this big conference with the leaders all over the world. And they asked me to give a whole series to this group and to this group. And then they said to Jennifer and me, we'll give you an overnight up in the hills of the Philippines in a beautiful place in Baguio. They said, it'll be our thanks to you. Well, Jennifer and I were really looking forward to this. I was exhausted at the end. And at the night before we were to leave, the next day, the leader comes into our hotel room, says, Bruce, we have 54 other leaders coming in, and because of what God did in the first 2 meetings, we didn't plan on this. Will you spend another day and teach this group? And Jennifer looked across and said, oh, Dad. I said, I don't know. This is something Dad and daughters plan. I need to think about that. We need to pray about this. So that night, Jennifer and I talked about this, and there was a heaviness in both of our hearts. And we got so disappointed because it was clear the Lord wanted us to do this, and we couldn't go to Baguio. It's a disappointing moment as a dad, if you've ever been there before. Well, the next day, I was in this hotel on the 3rd floor with 54 men from all over the world.